There's a very big difference between being an influencer on YouTube, Instagram or TikTok and being classed as a professional reviewer, or the word that I hate, expert reviewer. Not only does it make us sound like we know it all, it also puts a bit of an onus on us to get things right every time. And that's not always the case. Before new products hit the market, we, as again, air quote, experts, have to take the time to learn about the product. In some cases, it's architecture, and then try to understand it and regurgitate it back to you in a simple to digest way, all while fighting the SEO demons of search engines and of course, the dreaded YouTube algorithm, in the hope that the content gets pushed to you and we consequently get views. That's kind of it, summed up. Well, over the last couple of years, this has become even more difficult, and we have to look at what we're doing and revise the way that we do things too. Which brings me on to this little Frankenstein looking thing. This is going to form the basis of all case reviews on the channel moving forward. But before we jump into that, here's a quick word from our video sponsor.
Yep, face the camera, yep, that's it.
Power supply, so dreamy.
Oh my god, it's the Untitled signature.
With a fully modular design, 80+ titanium efficiency rating and 10-year warranty, it will be the most famous power supply you've ever owned. Find out more by clicking the link in the description below. So you're probably left wondering, firstly, what this is, and secondly, why has it got these weird blue wires coming out of it? Well, let me start with the simple stuff. If you haven't already seen our video on the new open bench table BC1 V2, I'd definitely advise checking that out because this is our baseline. What I'm trying to say is it's an open air test bench that not only allows us to use it while making content for motherboards, graphics cards, and all other major components, but it also allows us to get some baseline figures for case testing. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This technically isn't a case as such. So what is this all about? Well, we wanted to set up a system that comprised of all of the major components that the average gamer would need, but would fit into any PC case that we threw at it. And consequently, this was born. I mean, spec-wise, it's nothing too crazy. It's a Gigabyte Z590i Aorus Ultra Mini ITX motherboard because we have to think about size. Whatever system we chose would not only have to fit in your typical mid-tower cases, and of course larger, but would also have to fit into small form factor cases as well. And while it will look, I guess, fairly stupid inside larger cases that support mammoth eATX form factors, it's kind of the best way to keep things fair and consistent. Now, along with the Z590i Aorus Ultra motherboard, again, we wanted to keep the system typical of what a gamer would buy. And while a high-end i9 processor, I guess, would be nice, it's not exactly what the average gamer would actually go out and buy. That's why we paired it with an i5 11600K, giving us a nice balance of appealing to the mass consumer, being an i5, while also being a fairly middle ground SKU when it comes to temperatures, which is why we didn't go with AMD. And that kind of leads me on to the next part, the cooler, the Noctua NH-L9X65. Now, this isn't strictly typical of what a gamer would choose, but it allows us to have maximum compatibility with the cases we'll be putting the system in without any worry in terms of height or clearance issues. And the same goes for the memory. We've installed two 8GB modules of Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro SL for no reason other than it was one of the lowest profile kits we had laying around that we knew we basically wouldn't need for the foreseeable future. Really was that simple. SSD wise, we've gone with a WD Black 250GB NVMe drive. Again, very much like the memory, it was kind of just surplus in the office, and knowing that we didn't need to install anything too big in terms of file size, it just kind of made sense. We also made the decision to install the SSD on the underside of the motherboard and not actually in the primary M.2 slot on top, and for a very, very good reason. And that really comes down to the fact that we're going to be measuring temperatures from the chipset, pretty much the same location. Now, the other major part of this build is going to come down to the GPU. I know it's a sore subject for some people, but we wanted to use something that could pump out the frames at a modest 1080p resolution, while also being deemed as small form factor. This again meant finding a GPU that could be classed as ITX, or almost, and we of course wanted something fairly new in the grand scheme of things. We also wanted something that would, I guess, balance the system out well, and something that is available for, I know, I'm going to get flamed for this, a reasonable price. And that's where we settled on the EVGA RTX 3050 XC Black. It's a GPU that was released at MSRP pricing, has enough power behind it to help us with our testing, and again, the key important thing, it's actually fairly small. Again, so we have no restrictions when it comes to putting the complete system inside cases of all sizes, including small form factor builds. So the only other component we need to talk about are the power supplies, because this setup has got two available to us. The first being the Corsair RM650 for conventional based systems, and an SF750 SFX PSU from Corsair for smaller form factor cases that don't actually support full ATX based power supplies. Both PSUs have enough wattage for our build and also come with features that won't affect our testing, such as hybrid fan technology or 0 RPM mode. So with the system out the way, there's two major pieces of testing equipment that we need to talk about. The first is the Precision Gold N05cc sound level meter, which we placed 15 centimeters away from the system at a 45-degree angle at both idle and load. And this is going to allow us to measure the decibel audio level that the system creates. Simple stuff. The other testing equipment all comes down to this, frankly, mess of blue cables, and that is the Akazon Digital HT9815 4-channel thermocouple thermometer with K-type probes. And this really, out of everything, is the big one, and kind of the whole point of this video and what we're actually trying to achieve. By strategically placing the probes between the CPU and the cooler, the chipset heatsink, the GPU core and heatsink, and the M.2's controller, we'll have 4 points that we can measure at any one time. I mean, we've even labelled them: SSD, chipset, GPU, and CPU. So we can then measure the temperatures both at idle and load while running both Prime 95 and Firmark to put maximum stress on both the CPU and the GPU, kind of simulating things. And while I know this won't simulate maximum load on the NVMe drive, it will give us quite a good indication that's typical of your average gamer, sort of spikes, peaks, troughs. And we're going to do the same for the chipset as well. Now, we will let this run for 30 minutes and record the maximum temperature during that period, though we should see a fairly consistent level after around 5 minutes or so, but we want to be kind of as clear and concise as possible. Now, once we actually have that data, we can then wait for the system to cool down and then end up firing Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition up at 1080p and letting it loop for 30 minutes. And again, record the maximum temperature from the 4 predefined locations. All sounds complex, but I'm hoping it's actually going to be a lot simpler. Now, while this is happening, we will be using another device to make sure the ambient room temperature stays at a consistent 23 degrees with a margin of error of 0.2 degrees. In terms of the audio, we're going to end up recording the maximum noise level during our 30-minute Prime 95 and Firmark torture test. And the same process I mentioned will be how we do it for every case that comes through our doors. It's that simple. So all very technical, but actually quite simple. But I've still not explained the point of the open bench table. Well, as it's not a conventional case in the sort of finest sense of the word and has no fans, and other than the air in the room it's testing in, no movement of air around it at all, it allows us to set a baseline benchmark figure that can be used as a comparison to all future case reviews. We'd like to think that without the obstructions of a normal case, the temperatures should be amazing. Though without sufficient airflow from any kind of fans actually blowing over it, the temperature should be terrible at the same time. So it kind of gives us the best of both worlds, and something that I feel is a pretty amazing measuring stick as we move forward with our testing. So what will this tell you as we move through cases? One thing, predominantly. How does a case perform at its intended stock defaults? Some cases come with 1 fan pre-installed, some with 2, and some with 3 or more. And as a consumer myself, the main thing I want to know is, how is that stock performance with no alterations from the user on both the hardware or software side of things? Because, well, any result can be tweaked in some shape or another, whether that be by adding extra fans or adjusting the fan curve within the BIOS, and that's why any fans that are included will be plugged into a simple 8-port fan hub, which will then be connected to the motherboard, and the BIOS will be set to factory defaults. So the motherboard itself will be adjusting fan speeds as it deems necessary based on the temperatures. This actually means that while some scenarios may give us, say, better temperatures, it may result in more noise because the fans have ramped up, and vice versa. And in my opinion, that gives us a good basis to discuss the merits of that particular case that we're looking at that time. Hopefully that kind of all makes sense. It does to me, so hopefully it does to you. But if you've got any questions, put them down below. It's a lot to take in, I know, but I'm hoping you can maybe see our reasoning behind it all, as we've spent a lot of time and money on buying the necessary equipment, adjusting the method and the way of testing, and just thinking about the components that we wanted to use to make this all as fair as possible. And the beauty, I guess, of it all is that even if it's not the most accurate way of doing things, it doesn't need to be. As long as it's consistent, it forms a basis of comparable data. And, well, that is what this whole Frankenstein-looking thing is all about. How does one case compare to another using the same parts, under the same tests? Simple, right? At least I think it is, and it should make for some interesting content moving forward as well. But let me know, do you guys agree with how we've set out to do this? Do you think we've maybe missed anything? Let us know in the comments below, because right now, in a world where YouTube has become harder than ever to stand out, I feel that you guys are sick of the stupid poses on thumbnails and the stupid cringeworthy jokes, and instead, I don't know, maybe you want something you can sink your teeth into, because at the end of the day, it allows you to make a well-informed decision when parting with your hard-earned cash. Hopefully I'm onto something here. If you think I am, then a like and a sub to the channel would be greatly appreciated, and if you want to support us with everything that we do, you can do so through patreon.com. The link is down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.